It's debate day. Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and I thank you so much for joining us. What an exciting show we have in store. Of course, we're going to be talking about the presidential debate, what to expect. We also have, in the 7 o'clock hour, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, who's going to join us to catch us up on what happened in Albany at the end of the session. That's coming up in just a little bit. Let's hit the ground running. We are going to talk about the debate in just a second. I've got a couple other things to get to quickly that some will actually tie in to the debate, but a couple updates that I think are important. First, a comment from a viewer after yesterday's program. We mentioned on the show Hillary Clinton has a new book coming out, and this viewer says, "When is Hillary's book signing? I want to be the first in line," with 4 exclamation points. Well, if I hear, I will let you know. Undoubtedly, our former senator would have a book signing somewhere in New York, I would hope. So I will keep you updated. How about this? Luckily, this is not the case for you, those that watch Frankly Speaking every morning. But others may have a problem with the media. A new measure of Americans' deep distrust of the media. Why would that be? Philip Bump writes for the Washington Post. And just to show you quickly, before I give you the exact numbers, why the media doesn't get it. See, the media lives in a bubble. We've talked about this in the past. The media is also very egotistical. But when they are surrounded by people who all, for instance, hate Trump, like we see at the New York Times saying they don't have to be fair in their coverage because Trump is that dangerous. When they don't understand the deplorables, the bitter clingers, and they mock and ridicule them. And that goes back to my original point about Trump's rallies back in 2016. They thought it was such a circus. They thought it was so laughable that these rubes would attend these rallies for someone they did deem a clown, that they put him on the air and they would broadcast him. They didn't realize that the words Trump was saying to, as he would put it, the forgotten men and women of the country, was starting to really resonate with people. That's why they're not showing the rallies like they used to. I'm not saying learn their lesson, but they realized they made a big mistake, underestimating the intelligence of the American people. And this is what I mean by this. So in his analysis of why 7 in 10 voters don't trust the media, Mr. Bump says, that sentiment is particularly acute in the realm of political coverage. Donald Trump has spent nearly a decade attacking the press for its alleged failings that tend to correspond with coverage of his false statements. Okay, but I continue. Trump himself, of course, was simply picking up and amplifying a long-standing trend on the right to cast the media as opponents. In recent years, there's been a particularly acute criticism from the left as well. Complaints that coverage is insufficiently generous to the left or overly hospitable to the right and to Trump. Yes, we even saw that from Nancy Pelosi, who attacked Katie Tur isn't she MSNBC? Saying, well, what are you, a Trump apologist? By correcting her about a pandemic stat. So the left believes they're just not getting generous enough coverage. And you'll find out later in the program what this distrust and coverage like that has done to the media, so much so that CNN actually has a piece this morning, CNN, who is holding tonight's debate, saying that this is really a make or break for them tonight, that this is hoping to turn the ship around at CNN. That's an article they put out themselves. But as bad as the numbers, going back to Mr. Bump's piece, as bad as the numbers on media trust are, the numbers on exhaustion with political news are far worse. 7 in 10 swing state voters expressed at least some distrust in media coverage. 3/4 said they were worn out by it. The group least likely to express news fatigue was those who said they were satisfied with both Biden and Trump as candidates, a small and unusual group in a number of ways, says Mr. Bump. So 7 in 10 voters don't trust the media to report on politics accurately and fairly. Luckily, you don't have that worry because you watch Frankly Speaking weekday mornings starting at 6 a.m. Okay, couple of updates. The feds have ID'd 400 migrants smuggled into the United States by ISIS-affiliated networks, with the whereabouts of 50 unknown. Now you're saying 50, should I be terrified? I would think 50 is a terrifying number. The Department of Homeland Security has identified over 400 migrants who were brought to the U.S. from Central Asia and other places by an ISIS-affiliated human smuggling network. And the whereabouts of more than 50 of them are unknown. And keep in mind, these are just the numbers that they know. This isn't even the numbers of the gotaways. More than 150 of the migrants have been arrested, but the locations of another 50 remain unknown. That's 3 U.S. officials that spoke in anonymity to NBC News, adding that the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is looking to arrest those involved on immigration charges. Now that ties in, and we are going to move fast this morning, ties in with Mayorkas and how out of touch, how tone deaf the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas is. Yesterday, he shrugged off attempts to blame the Biden administration's border policy for the horrific slaughter of Americans at the hands of illegal migrants. And we've had horrible stories in the news lately, back to back, just to the point where I don't want to go into the details of exactly what happened here at this hour. And you can do the research yourself because it is prevalent on places like the New York Post. So what he said, remember he called, this was probably, I don't know, was it last week? Sorry, it starts to blend together because we've covered so much, where he called Rachel Morin the individual, kind of dehumanizing her. Rachel Morin, of course, allegedly killed at the hands of an illegal immigrant. Yesterday, he said the individual who is responsible for a heinous criminal act is the criminal. So it's not Biden's border policy that led these alleged murderers and rapists into the country. That has nothing to do with it. It's the individual that is responsible. This was during a press conference from a Border Patrol aircraft hangar in Tucson, Arizona, some 70 miles from the nearest border crossing. And that came, and the question, or the answer from Mayorkas came from a question that was asked to him about the 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing her name wrong. I don't do that out of any disrespect. That is a heartbreaking story. 12-year-old. And again, not wanting to go into the details, but just despicable what these two people did. She was brutalized and murdered in Houston, allegedly by 2 Venezuelan migrants who were released into the U.S. earlier this year. He said, we screen and vet individuals when we encounter them, which is also a very scary point, when we encounter them. So what does that mean for the assumed 400 migrants that were smuggled in by ISIS, and where the whereabouts of 50 are unknown? What about the ones that are that they never encountered? Now, border agents quickly responded with skepticism to what Mayorkas had to claim, saying that he lived in a fairy tale land. I don't know what Mayorkas is smoking because it needs to be legalized, one Border Patrol source told the New York Post. If by vetting he means fingerprinting and doing some, we'll say half-baked, background check that has access to almost nothing outside the U.S., then yeah, it's a great process. Mayorkas even defended the border vetting process, while having to acknowledge at least 8 ISIS-linked suspected terrorists managed to slip through U.S. custody and enter the country. But now we're learning perhaps even more. And I'm not, again, going into each individual story because you've seen it. But obviously the vetting is not working. These stories have become prevalent. Now, keep in mind, we were told by the media, it was from a response. It was a response from the media, but it was Representative Jayapal from Washington saying that It's fear-mongering if you bring up these stories. If you bring up the crime, the murders, the rapes, that you're fear-mongering. What you're supposed to be focused on are Biden's policies that they deem successful, meaning the border policies, which, of course, are not successful. So Mayorkas showing how out of touch he is, that it is no one's fault. It's not Biden's fault. It's not his fault about these criminals being and now we learn ISIS-related potential terrorists being out in the United States. That is not in any way, shape, or form Biden's fault. It is, or Mayorkas's. It is, of course, the criminal themselves. There is a piece, we will not have time to get to it, and it also gets pretty graphic in full disclosure. But Betsy McKay at the New York Post has a fantastic piece this morning, which really shows kind of the hypocrisy of those that aren't covering this. It's entitled, it's at the New York Post this morning, entitled, Biden's open border has infected America with femicide plague. The United Nations calls it femicide, the wanton assault, rape, and murder of girls and women due to their gender. It's a criminal epidemic in Latin America. Femicide is visible every step of the way from South America and the Northern Triangle countries to Mexico's northern border. And then this is where it gets very graphic. But do you think, she asks, the rapes stop when illegal immigrants cross into the United States? Well, the answer is no. Now women are being victimized by migrants bringing femicide to your neighborhood. Where are the women's rights groups? Silent. They couldn't care less. It's politically incorrect to criticize this tolerance for violence against females. She gives specific examples of this and then says, yet Representative Jayapal laughed off news coverage of these monstrous crimes as fear-mongering. Again, going through more example after more example, which will really, if I read it or if you read it right now, will ruin your morning. Leftists deny the problem, she says. They're horrified that Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein was accused of this and found guilty on a casting couch, but they're willfully blind when Latin Americans illegally commit rape. And again, I don't want to go through, there's so many specifics. She said, leftists object to the word illegal. This is how she wraps it up, preferring the term undocumented instead. But let's not mince words. Some are rapists and killers, monsters. Close the border to stop the femicide madness. I thought very powerful piece. If you have an example, or if you have a second to read it, you'll see the examples that I just don't want to go into on the program. Okay, when we come back, we've got to talk a lot about the debate. Those are just a couple of updates. Again, not to terrify you. I have one or two more kind of updates that will eventually tie in to tonight's debate. So stay with us. We got to take our first break. This is Frankly Speaking. And we are back. Look at that view of historic Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. One other quick update. America's drinking water is facing attack by China, Russia, and Iran. This actually coming from CNBC. Cyber attacks on the country's water systems could damage infrastructure, disrupt the availability or flow of water, and alter chemical levels, contaminating public drinking water supplies. A recent string of attacks on water utilities, including systems in Kansas, Texas, and Pennsylvania, perhaps a trial run. Taking out critical national infrastructure has become a top priority for foreign-linked cyber criminals. Quote, all drinking water and wastewater systems are at risk, large and small, urban and rural, said an EPA spokesman. It is not my intention to terrify you this morning. That was an update because we bring up China, Russia, and Iran, and unfortunately, I believe this administration and many in Washington not taking that threat seriously, specifically when it comes to Iran. You see the president asking our allies not to mention their nuclear ambitions or chide them for their nuclear ambitions, which is growing faster by the day, because he doesn't want Biden any type of trouble before November. Okay, a comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. I can't help but wonder what they have planned. I fear a big-time gotcha moment. This, of course, because of the debate. Because they are schemers and do it without a conscience. Granting a partial gag allowance says it all. And how was that allowed to go on for months of court hearings anyway to anyone, especially a former president? How was that allowed to happen? They are showing us what is in store, in my opinion. I agree. And here's a couple more examples. I'm glad you brought that up. Because undoubtedly by now you heard about the Supreme Court accidentally, I don't know, we had that leak earlier, I don't know, but accidentally posting the Idaho abortion case document, and the press, the idea that the White House can now press social media companies to remove what they deem disinformation, which Alito rallied against. But that's not why I bring this up. But there is, if you want to know more about that, James Bovard has a piece called Supreme Court Censorship Ruling Lets Biden Muzzle Us Online and Meddle in the Election, which we saw happen with the Hunter laptop story. But Politico has a piece this morning saying, get ready for the Supreme Court to drop some bombshell decisions. They've already said they were going to release opinions Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Do you wonder, and maybe I'm just being... I don't know what the term is, pessimistic. Will the immunity decision come out today, the day of the debate? The timing on this was, I mean, remember, Biden picked the time. I find that raised a red flag to me, okay? We're not going to get into everything, but to have huge bombshell decisions coming out the day of the debate and the day after the debate could be very interesting, both negative and or positive, but it also ties in with, and perhaps you've seen it before we get into the nitty gritty of the debate, there was quite a few articles this morning and yesterday about the poll numbers of former President Trump, that his numbers are up, some of the highest leads he's had. Trump holds a 4-point lead over Biden ahead of the first debate, his biggest jump yet, according to a new poll. Now, this is coming from the New York Post, so I don't believe there's anything nefarious here. But I do believe the fact that this poll has been released and showing Trump, because remember, I never really trust polls, to show this. Why does this concern me? Because you have Trump holding this 4-point lead. Biden puts on a performance tonight. It's okay. But the media says it's the greatest performance of a president in a debate history, or it is when it was needed most, Biden outshines Trump, or Biden pulls the best performance of his life. You start seeing articles like that. Next thing you know, the next poll shows that Trump's down a point, or Trump is tied, and see, Biden did win, and now the momentum is back. It raises a lot of red flags to me. Trump received 48% support among likely voters in comparison to Biden's 44% backing, according to a New York Times Siena College poll released yesterday. Does that make you... Listen, if you are a Trump supporter, you're saying, well, this is good news. Trump's up in the polls. We should look at this as a positive. And the fact that the media is covering it, we should look at that as a positive. Do you, again, maybe I'm jaded, do you think these numbers are coming out from the New York Times because it gives an opportunity at the end of the debate and the next poll release to show that Biden's got his momentum back? Why are they reporting on a 4-point lead over Biden by former President Trump right before the debate? Also, and I'm sure you're familiar with this person, Nate Silver. Nate Silver was loved by the left. I believe he still is. He's a pollster, and he's like most pollsters. He's been right, sometimes been wrong, others. But polling expert Nate Silver, again, right before the debate, makes Trump a heavy favorite to beat Biden in November, saying it's not even a toss-up. Why does this come up now? I'm going to give you more of what he said in just a moment, but we are running late, so stay with us. A lot more about the debate, but does this raise red flags for you? Perhaps a Supreme Court decision today. Who knows? That could change tonight's questions. Media outlets, who the voters say they do not trust, media outlets talking poll after poll about how great Trump is doing right before the debate. What are your thoughts? Stay with us. And we are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Don't forget, in the 7 o'clock hour, we will be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, so feel free to get your questions in at any time. As I said, this just raises red flags to me before the debate that the mainstream media, the legacy media, is reporting on poll numbers being positive for Trump because it gives it such an easy story to follow up on after the debate, that the momentum is now in Biden's corner and Biden has closed that gap. And Nate Silver saying that based on 40,000 simulations run through his model, he predicts that Biden is likely to edge out Trump in the popular vote by 1/10 of a percentage point. But in the all-important Electoral College, Silver's model has Trump receiving 287 electoral votes, just above the 270 needed to win the White House. He said, and I quote, "The candidate who I honest to God think has a better chance, Trump, isn't the candidate I'd rather have win, Biden. The presidential election isn't a toss-up. If the Electoral College popular vote gap looks anything like it did in 2016 or 2020, you'd expect Biden to be in deep trouble if the popular vote is roughly tied." So these all come out right before the debate. Just something to consider if you start seeing headlines in the morning. We're going to talk tomorrow all day, not all day, 2 hours about the debate. Don't worry. But you'll start to see, in my prediction, headlines, depending on the performance. I mean, it would have to be a very bad performance from Biden for the headlines not to read that he outshined Trump, that he came through when it mattered most, the energy, the Joe Biden we know is back. And then you'll start to see how the momentum has shifted. Now, a lot of outlets, TV outlets, are very angry with CNN because of their rules, and perhaps you've seen it, where you have to announce that it's on CNN if you are going to simulcast it. But there's other problems that the TV networks are having. First, the White House Correspondents Association wrote CNN asking if they could be allowed to, and again, I don't want to keep using the term red flags, but think about this. They asked if one of their representatives could sit in the studio during the debate. CNN denied that request. The network is allowing a limited number of still photographers in the debate room. Some 800 others will be watching a feed in a building across the street from the main studio. Okay. Now, why is there concern? Listen to this. And this, I don't want to say this fits my prediction, but because it's not really come to fruition yet. But I said if things start going poorly for Biden, if it's one of the Juneteenth situations where he stares off and it gets very uncomfortable, or if he starts to ramble off, they will cut from his feed. It'll either be switching from Biden staring off, or it will be, sorry, Mr. President, we have to cut you off, or they'll mute him with it, because of course we have the muted microphone. They can do it that way. We have to cut you off. Your time's up. Or, sorry, Mr. President, we have to go to a break. So this is why there's concern among other networks, is that something could happen in the debate room that only CNN journalists would witness. Unlike and would CNN report on them? You've got to ask that question. If there's something negative that happens, would they report on it? Unlike past debates, this debate doesn't have a live audience, and microphones of the other candidates will be muted when one is speaking. That could mean rival journalists miss gestures, asides during the coverage, or something more serious like a medical emergency involving one of the candidates. It's an interesting point. You're basing it solely on who is running the production, who is saying cut the camera one, that type of thing. And if something were to happen, you are relying on the word of the moderators. Just something to keep in mind. Now, I had mentioned this at the top of the hour. CNN, this is coming from CNN. Listen to this headline. CNN presidential debate marks a pivotal moment for the network as it hopes to reverse its fortunes. I have been talking about this for weeks now, that's why there's the commercial breaks, getting some revenue in, the revenue that is not there at CNN. That's why CNN is demanding that everybody bring up their name that will simulcast the debate, because they are a flailing network. And they have been for a while because the bias is so prevalent. I bring up their bias on this program perhaps daily by reading some of their articles and showing you their true feelings. We know the moderators themselves have compared Trump to Hitler and made other atrocious comments. I'm just going to read this quickly because I don't want everything to be focused on CNN. But it is a pivotal moment, not just for the country as it picks a new president, but also for CNN, with a new leader at the helm of the news network that has been beset by declining television viewership as it urgently embarks on a major newsroom overhaul to embrace its digital future. Thursday night's presidential debate, a marketing coup for CNN and its new chief executive, Mark Thompson, will offer the network a bright spot and expectations of record ratings, even if viewers end up watching the debate on other networks. No matter where viewers tune in to watch the primetime matchup, it will be clear that this is a CNN debate. As a public service, CNN has allowed other networks to air the event so long as they agree to the network's rules over how the event is programmed and rebroadcast. Rival networks, for example, have agreed to use CNN in the programming title and keep the red CNN logo on screen throughout the debate. I don't want to go into any more of this, but this is actually coming from CNN, that this is to reverse their fortunes, that they really, really needed this. I know some have been concerned, or maybe criticized, even Trump supporters have been critical of this, saying, why did Trump help save CNN? And I can understand. I can understand that concern. Now, let's go into the nitty-gritty of this debate. This is, as on a lighter note, something that we brought to you last week. Coming from Fox News, Trump says he has UFO files. Will he be asked about it at the debate? There is now kind of a viral campaign to have one of the questions and the precious amount of time that they have be about UFOs. That's the question fueling the disclosure debate social media campaign to urge the debate moderator to include, they're now called UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. And this isn't a knock on either of the candidates, Biden or Trump. If someone said, what do you think about UAPs? Wouldn't you go, what? What are you talking about? What is UAP? And especially in Washington parlance, there are so many. FBI, you know the popular ones, but there's so many more. So to all of a sudden throw UAP, I could see a lot of people getting confused. So I hope that they would say unidentified anomalous phenomena if they do ask a question. It's time for all presidential candidates, Joe Biden, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Donald Trump, to commit to UFOs, UAP disclosure, and transparency. Okay, enough on that. Let's take a break. Then we're going to get into actual nitty-gritty. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your predictions about tonight's historic CNN presidential debate? Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Here's a comment from a viewer, and I think it's a really good point. I had not thought about this. It will be interesting to see if Biden and Trump shake hands or not. Come out, touch gloves, maybe more appropriate. I hadn't really thought about that. It will be interesting, won't it? I don't know. I don't even want to make a prediction, but you can make a prediction. Do you think they'll shake hands? Joy Reid from MSNBC. And I just want to highlight at the beginning of the show, if you didn't tune in, 7 in 10 voters say that they do not trust the media. Back to Joy Reid's comment. She finds it deeply offensive. Boy, everything is really offensive, isn't it? Deeply offensive that felon Trump gets to stand next to the actual president. Now, of course, convicted felon was the ultimate goal in the trial. So this, I don't want to go into all of what she said, but Because it's a little bit too much here, but Biden is good at this already. He has zero respect for Donald Trump. He grew up not having any respect for someone born wealthy and didn't work hard. Now, keep that in mind. Joe Biden, who has been in public service his whole life, who has been in politics his whole life, has no respect for someone that didn't work hard. Now, I don't know. Would you argue that someone that's been in politics their whole life worked hard? That's, I think, a fair question. I'm not going to say one way or the other. This is deep. I don't think he's intimidated by Trump the way that the Republicans want to say. And then Joy Reid said, "Are you all as offended as I am about the fact that it's possible for this person who is a felon, an adjudicated sexual assaulter, to stand next to the actual president, and we're supposed to take him seriously? There's something deeply offensive about that." Boy, offensive is thrown around quite a bit. If you are someone that enjoys debates like this a lot, you thoroughly enjoy watching, some call it politically wonky, but enjoy watching this, but maybe your family doesn't like it quite as much. Well, the New York Post has actually done something. I want to bring it to your attention. I think it's a pretty cool idea. I'm not going to do it myself, but if you are interested, and let me put it up on the screen. They have debate bingo. And now you say, well, everybody's going to have the same card. No, if you look, you can put up a new card, click there, and they'll change it. So you can print it out for every member of your family and see who wins. Look at some of the ones they have. Critical race theory, voter fraud, Hillary, Jack Smith. What's the next one? China, interesting. Laptop, Fannie Willis. I don't know. I just thought that was a really clever idea from the New York Post. But the New York Post has a different kind of game if you don't want to make it a family game. If you want to make it, and I'm not encouraging this, an official drinking game for tonight's debate. This is what they say. First, let's keep you hydrated. Take a sip of water every time a candidate references the election being, quote, the most important of our lifetime. Do the same with the phrase inflection point, if Biden says it, because Biden's the only one that would say it, or not going to have a country, and that's Trump's. That's a sip of water to stay hydrated. Then you take a sip of your drink whenever the camera pans to moderators Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Uh-oh. We're already getting into troubled waters if you actually take this seriously. Or every time Trump says crooked or Biden says, come on, man. Whenever Trump references the Biden crime family. When a candidate uses a 3-letter acronym, like I was mentioning earlier, FBI, IRS, DEI, CDC, the list can go on and on. When Trump brings up migrant crime, or when either candidate brings up the border. I don't see Biden bring up the border that much unless he tries to say we had the biggest crackdown, which would be. And the other reason I don't want you to do this drinking game, though I think it's clever by the New York Post, I don't want you to do this drinking game because by the time you are done with this, there is absolutely no way you're waking up Rosie to watch Frankly Speaking at 6 a.m. But I'll continue. Take a shot whenever Biden refers, this is now not a sip anymore, taking a shot. Whenever Biden refers to Trump as a convicted felon, uh-oh, now we're getting really tipsy. When one candidate interrupts the other, that'll be interesting with the mic mute. If a candidate wags his finger at another candidate while making a point, when either candidate brings up the border, when either promises not to touch entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, every time the word Russia is mentioned. Okay, you're not going to make this. You'll be 10 minutes into the debate. Take 2 shots. Again, I'm not recommending this. Do not do this. Drink responsibly. When Biden asks of Trump and Republicans, what are they for? Yeah, he does say that a lot, doesn't he? When Biden says he's proud of convicted first son Hunter. Ooh, another good one. Whenever Trump calls Biden sleepy, or if either candidate brings up Hunter's laptop. Now you chug your beer. If either candidate calls for the other to be jailed, if either candidate looks like they're falling asleep, and finish all the liquor in your cabinet if Trump and Biden actually agree on something. That's from the New York Post. I thought that was kind of clever and a fun way to look at tonight's debate. Now, according to Jason Chaffetz, works for Fox News. He was, I can't remember. Was he, I think, senator, wasn't he? Anyway, To shift the momentum in a presidential rematch, be set by lawfare, claims of misinformation, and increasing international instability. Both Trump and Biden need to impress a dwindling pool of persuadable voters at the debate. It's a delicate balancing act for each of them, but not for the same reason. Trump will be on offense, looking to make inroads with traditional Democratic constituencies alienated by failed Biden administration policies. Even a small percentage of the factors from traditional Democratic voting blocs could swing an election his way. For his part, Biden will have to play defense, defending the indefensible while attempting to demonstrate a level of competence that is increasingly in question. Fortunately for Biden, the bar is low. As long as he doesn't drool, the mainstream media will call it a win. And of course, that's not some huge political statement. We've been saying it for a long time, and it wasn't huge when we said it. But the bar has been set so very low that with all this preparation, keep in mind, the President of the United States has been locked away at Camp David for a week now, maybe over a week, practicing and rehearsing for this debate. So if you see a ad lib or something that's off the cuff, it is not. It's to make him look fresh. It's to make him look on top of his game so that they can put that article out, which is probably already written, that Biden has the performance of his life when it was needed most. Now, he goes through and, talking about what they'll be hitting Trump on. So Trump is maybe eventually gets angry, gets aggressive. The risk for Trump is overplaying his hand. If people see the bombastic villain the leftists portrayed Trump as, he could miss his opportunity. Overplaying the victim card over his prosecutions could backfire on him. Yes, I also think that's why the gag order was changed. It was almost like it felt like a setup, because Judge Merkin would not have done that at that exact time if he didn't think it had some implications for the debate. And that was specifically about the witnesses, remember. So why did he do that at that time? As if perhaps he knew something that would come up in the debate? Trump needs to show he is presidential, in command of the facts, rational in his approach, and ready to solve problems voters care about. Rather than take the bait, Biden will gladly provide. We'll continue with a little more of this. Well, it does say the risk of Trump is overplaying his hand. Overplaying the victim card over his prosecutions could backfire, as I said. But by the same token, it is that lawfare that is generating new support in traditionally leftist minority communities. Is it enough to change the momentum? Time will tell. Yes, he doesn't want to overplay it, I agree, but it's also brought a lot of people over to Trump that maybe did not want to be in Trump's camp. Seeing this lawfare, seeing this attack on a former president through the judicial system with a case that we still don't really know what the charges were, has brought some people over who begrudgingly do not want to support Trump, begrudgingly supporting Trump. We got to take a break. Running late. I knew we would. We have an exciting show, so stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. So we're talking about what Jason Chaffetz has to say about tonight's debate and what Trump has to do and what Biden has to do. And he says President Biden has an even more intricate task. If he is forced to defend some of his most unpopular policies, it could be game over for him. Will the moderators at CNN have the courage to ask tough questions about his disastrous foreign policy? Will Biden be made to answer for Afghanistan, Ukraine, Iran, open borders, or escalating inflation and debt? What is Biden's plan to fight back on inflation? I've got a few comments on that. Okay, so first of all, keep in mind, the bar has been set so low, and we've said this numerous times, that I would put it out of your mind that it's going to be a game changer by Biden in a negative way, that he's going to have some type of huge gaffe, some type of huge mental lapse. I would put that to the side. I don't think that is going to happen. I could be wrong. I don't think that is going to happen. So I guess for the Trump supporters out there, don't get your hopes up. Or for you in the Democrat Party that are hoping for a disastrous debate so that Biden maybe will be forced to step aside and someone else be put in. I don't see that because I think we're going to see a State of the Union scenario, okay? So having said that, we push that aside. You can prove me wrong tomorrow. If I'm wrong, that's fine. But we put that to the side. And we know the media is already going to say it's a great performance no matter what he does. So mediocre, it was a great performance by Biden. If it's a good performance, it's going to be the best that Biden's ever done when it was needed most, or perhaps, depending on the level of okay, it could be the best debate performance in presidential history. So keep that in mind. Because remember, they have to really, quote unquote, change the momentum as they're releasing polls that are allegedly showing Trump up by so many points right before the debate. This gives them the opportunity to say how great it is. And then at the end, they can start saying, a couple days from now, wow, the momentum has changed. Biden's really got his groove back, so to speak. So prepare for that from the media. But to the voters, when they're watching it, will Biden be able to defend his policies? But the question we also have to ask, and again, being pessimistic, will the tough questions be asked of Biden by CNN? I truly don't believe so. Again, I hope that you can prove me wrong tomorrow. I think most of the questions will revolve around abortion, January 6th, Trump's trial. You may get an issue in there or a question in there about Ukraine, because I think Biden could do a better job of defending what he's done in Ukraine as compared to perhaps Israel, Iran, obviously Afghanistan. So will there be a lot of foreign policy questions? I have my doubts. Will they talk about the changes in the Democrat Party that have led to this very vocal part of the Democrat Party that is anti-Israel? Time will tell. I have my doubts. Will they talk about the economy? Now, if they ask him about the economy, he has those talking points that he tries to justify, saying it is a great economy. The media is pushing the same thing. So will they have that opportunity? Will they give him an opportunity to talk about the economy when we know what we're feeling, but he will tell us it's good, so that won't really hurt him. I also think, and I'm going to make this prediction, and I could be completely wrong, and I don't like to make predictions. I do think something will come up about age and mental health. And the reason I think that is because it gives Biden an opportunity to make a joke and show he's relatable. It'll be reminiscent, but not as effective, but it'll be one of those reminiscent of when Reagan had the "I will not exploit my opponent's youth and inexperience" moments. They'll be ready for a joke on that. And I think Tapper and the folks at CNN Dana Bash know that could set him up for a zinger, which at the end of the day is what they want the most from a debate. So I do think age will come up. Let's take our last break of this hour. Don't forget, Assemblyman Phil Palmesano is coming up in the next hour during the Student Senior Services Fund section of our program. I'd love to hear your predictions on the debate, because tomorrow we'll be talking about what happened at the debate the full time. So please make your predictions. What do you see? Good, bad, or indifferent? I don't mind. You can say, Frank, I think you have been completely wrong this whole program, and I will, unless it starts cursing, I will be happy to read that on the air. So let me know. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we wrap up our number one of Debate Day edition of Frankly Speaking. Isaac Shore at the New York Post says, here's who will win the first presidential debate. Well, that caught my attention. Every pundit across the United States is feeling the same question. Who is going to win the debate? Now, the correct answer isn't necessarily the most satisfying. It's not Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but it's whoever manages to avoid looking like and is able to paint his opponent as this election cycle's chaos candidate. Interesting. For many years now, American voters have doggedly rejected candidates who carry excessive baggage and drama with them. Look at recently Bowman being booted out. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole point here, but I think it's fair. And you look at the chaos when it comes to Biden when we talk about foreign policy and domestic policy, and there's a chaos that the media says that Trump brings, which is kind of his style. Biden is the grandpa whose family is considered taking the keys away, but the car he's driving is that of the executive branch, and the family's strapped in the back seat for at least the next 6 months. Delivering crisp and even forceful answers would go a long way toward mitigating this deliberate or debilitating, image issue. Yes, again, that's a really good way of putting it. Just some forceful answers, kind of his demeanor during the State of the Union. After 8 years of taking Americans on a wild roller coaster ride, Joe Biden and Donald Trump's task at their first debate is to convince them they're uniquely suited to slow it down. Good luck to both of them. What Trump would you like to see tonight? Many have said we don't want the rally Trump, the MAGA rally Trump. Some have said that's what they do want. What do you expect to see from Biden? Do you see Biden on the attack the whole time, convicted felon, those type of things, bringing up that to get under Trump's skin? Or do you see him trying to tell the American people, no, I know my policies are deemed not good, but I think they are good. Here's what I'm trying to do, trying to talk about himself. So is that all anti-Trump, or is it pro-Biden coming from Biden? And what Trump do you expect to see tonight? And by the way, when we're talking with the Assemblyman, you can feel free to comment on the debate. Maybe at the end, I will try to read as many as I can before we wrap up with the Assemblyman, because I do really want to hear your predictions. Tonight is going to be an interesting night, earliest presidential, as you know, debate in history, well, at least in modern times, I suppose. So it really changes kind of the course of the campaign year. Normally kicking into full gear after Labor Day. This is a big night, and I don't know. What are your thoughts about a midsummer or early summer, whatever you want to look at it, debate? Is this how you wanted to spend your Thursday night, June 27th of 2024? Just your thoughts. Maybe, and you know what? You can even text me and say you're not even going to watch it. That's how uninterested you are. I just want to hear your take. And we will have a couple minutes in the next hour before we talk with the Assemblyman to rush through a couple of quick stories. So keep that in mind. So Assemblyman Phil Palmesano joining us in the next hour. I also wanted to mention, before I have 10 seconds before I go, on Friday's show, we are going to be talking all debate, but for about 5 minutes. We're going to be talking with our good friend Joe Barlow. You remember Joe from the Salvation Army Telethon and the Crystal Chords and all those amazing Christmas songs that we played for you during the telethon and then later on Christmas morning. Well, they've got an event coming up in August, a couple of them, called Summer Sing. She'll be joining us tomorrow, so keep that in mind. But right now, hour number 1 in the books. Stay with us. Hour number 2 coming up after this. And we are back. Hour number 2. With Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, if you are just waking up, it is debate morning in America. We have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano coming up in just a little bit. Feel free to ask questions to him. I'll try to get to as many as we can. We have a lot to cover. A couple quick comments from viewers from the last hour. Absolutely agree about the keys being taken away. That means that, as Isaac Shore said, that Biden right now feels as if it's someone trying to convince a loved one that it's time to give up their keys. I think it's not going to change anyone's mind, though. Both parties' minds are very firm. As evidence, wearing any campaign apparel is socially frowned upon. Yeah, it depends where you're headed and what you've got on, what it could actually mean for you. But I think that's a fair point. I do think there are some people, surprisingly, on the fence. I think tonight has a lot, especially for Biden supporters or potential supporters. They want to see, because he gives so few press conferences and things like that, and when he gives a speech, he normally kind of wanders off and those kind of weird zoning out moments. So I think it's time for them to see for themselves what he looks like at an hour and a half. I think there are some people that are wondering, but I don't think is going to end up being a factor. I do think it's going to be a State of the Union scenario, and the media will be able to spin it as a great performance, no matter what. Now, according to CNN, they said what to watch during Biden and Trump's presidential debate. Now, this is not in any way done by Jake Tapper or Dana Bash, so it's not, when they say what to watch for, I don't think this gives away what any of the questions will be, though some of them are so obvious that you know what they'll be asking. What Trump focuses on, Biden's records record or his grievances. And that, I do think that is an important point. Will Trump focus on his grievances, the trials, the election, the things that he, for lack of a better word, complains about? Will he focus on that, or will he focus on Biden's record? I think a lot of people want to see him focus on Biden's record, which I do think there's a time and a place in the debate to bring up the trial and the lawfare and the weaponization of the judicial system that plays to his effect, that plays to his benefit. But it can't be the only focus. And I think that's what Biden's going to do to goad him into that, to get angry, to just talk about his grievances. How Biden seeks to answer the age question. Okay, so they're assuming here that the age question will come up, or just how he looks overall in his performance. I do, as you may have heard in the last hour, I do believe there'll be an age question or a mental health type question, because it sets up the president for a zinger, a one-liner. Next, what Trump will say about abortion. Scrutiny over inflation under Biden. Now, Biden will have an answer for that. We will know what we know. It will not be necessarily factual, because it'll be statistics. I'm not calling them a lie. I'm just saying it'll be a good way to spin that it turns out, just like they've been telling us for how long, that the economy is great, even though we all go to the grocery store and we all fill up our gas tanks. What Biden says about Trump and democracy. Now, that could be another thing. If that's what Biden focuses on the whole time, that could sound like a broken record. That could get very old to viewers. So will Biden focus on the threat to democracy? I think it will definitely come up. I think he will also attack him as a convicted felon. And I don't know if that means Hunter gets brought into the mix. That should be interesting. How Biden addresses Israel and Gaza, their opposition on foreign policy. And last one from CNN. There are differences on the border and immigration. So that's what CNN says to look for tonight. I don't know if that's any hints to the questions that will be asked, but we have Assemblyman Phil Palmesano coming in, so stay with us. We got to take a short break. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program, because we're being joined by Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Frank. Good to be with you on a Thursday instead of a Friday.
I know. Well, we're changing things up, and I think it works out, because I think tomorrow's going to be all about the debate. I have a feeling.
Absolutely.
I have a feeling.
Agree.
So I think this all works out for the best. And I think we're going to change it up again, a little bit different. Let's talk positive to begin with, because I know we've got a lot to cover that maybe wasn't as positive coming out of Albany. You have been very, very busy, and we've tried to bring up as much as we can on the show. Tell us about honoring, if you will, our champs.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's a lot of things about the job I will say are challenging and frustrating, but certainly there are fun parts and exciting parts about the job. And over the past month, Senator O'Mara and myself have been able to honor some of our local athletes and athletic teams. It started back in May when Peyton Mullen, a freshman from Dundee High School, who captured the girls wrestling state championship.
Wow.
She actually came up to Albany, so she was recognized up in Albany. And she's got a bright future ahead of her as a freshman. I mean, so a lot of times we like to go into the schools right in front of their peers, in front of their families to do that. But it was nice to have Peyton come up to Albany and honor her up there. She was one of our state champions. James, as they refer to him, J.D. Tett of Penn Yan. He won, he's a senior. He won the New York State cross country championship for his division. So it was exciting to go to his school and present that to him, and also to see it throughout, because it was at their annual sports banquet. He also received several awards from the school throughout the evening. So he's a very talented athletic individual. He's going to, believe going on to Geneseo to run track and cross country there. Also, just this past weekend for the Watkins Glen sports banquet, was there to recognize Maddie Tuttle, a sophomore.
Wow.
Now, Maddie won the Adidas Indoor National Track Championship for the 1 mile race walk. And so when I went up to her, I go, so what are you going on? You going to school? She goes, I'm a sophomore. I go, you're a sophomore? So that was exciting. And Maddie won another award in the evening. So, and the thing about going to these banquets and seeing, we have so much talent, and sports is such a big part of our community and part of our what we've seen, though. So those three right there, just to start.
Is Maddie Tuttle any relation to Molly Tuttle? I wonder.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that they're when it comes to. Anyway, I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. So no, it's just exciting. Then we had a day. There was one day we went from. We started in Bath for the girls soccer champion, and I'll get to the teams in a minute. Then we spent. We were in Corning there were some individuals and team awards. The first individual award that we certainly want to recognize, Angie McCain. She won. She's a senior. Won the state championship in the 100 fly and the 50 freestyle. That's a repeat of her performance as a junior.
Wow.
And then as a sophomore, she had won the state championship in the 100 fly. So she's 3 years in a row as a state champion. And I know she's off to West Point. She broke so many school, sectional, divisional records, pool records across through her years, and especially in her senior year. So she's going to go off to West Point and obviously serve. So it's exciting for her. Then Taylor Farrell. She won the 15. She's from Corning also. She's a senior. She won the 1,500 meter race walk indoor state championship. She followed that up with the New Balance 1 mile indoor national track championship. And not to be leave it at there. Yeah. Just last weekend, she competed in the New Balance outdoor national track championship, and she took home the 1 mile race walk for that. Now we couldn't present Taylor a presentation for that because it was after we adjourned in session, but we dropped off one of the other ones to her that we didn't have at the time too, and said so hopefully next year we will go back and honor her with others. So while we were at Corning, too, we also recognized the boys bowling team who won a state championship for their accomplishments. So that was exciting. And then we couldn't present a resolution and proclamation to the girls softball team, but they won the state championship on the final week. And it was I remember I was driving home from Albany on Saturday, January 8th. Or not January. June 8th. Yeah. And as I was driving, my wife called me and said, "You have 2 more state champions that won today." Oh, no. One of them was the Corning softball team. The other was Arkport Cancerega boys baseball team. So we couldn't really we recognized the girls because we were in Corning, but we didn't have anything to present to them. So we'll go back to present to them later. And then we started out that day. Because we started out in Bath before we went to Corning, and then Penny and Don or JD Tett, the Bath girls soccer team won the state championship this year as well. So
we're dominating in our area.
And they unveiled their state championship banner. So exciting news. And then the other team on that Saturday that won the state championship, we couldn't recognize that we couldn't do yet, and we will. And
of course.
I talked to the superintendent. Is the Arkport Cancerega boys baseball team won the state championship. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'd say you guys are busy.
And it doesn't really end with them, not just on the athletic side. We have a local robotics team. It's made up of students from Corning, Horseheads, and some other students from Chemung County. It's called Team TARDIS. And what they did is they started in competition here throughout the state and in the region. They won the upstate regional championship. So they were upstate New York champs. They were the regional champs. They called it the Inspire Award. They got to go on and compete in the world competition in Houston, Texas.
Oh, wow.
So against 224
something like that. Because when I saw the picture, it was a great picture.
Yeah, and they finished 16th in the world.
That's amazing.
So we have talented young men and women.
We sure do.
In the athletic department and the academic and just science, technology. So we have some young, talented individuals. But so there again, we will have to, to the girls Corning softball team, to the Arkport Cancerega baseball team, and Taylor Farrell, who they achieved those accomplishments before we wrapped up. We'll be back to present to them as well in the future next year once we get back to session and can pass some of the stuff. And I will say what we do when we present these resolutions, we present usually a state resolution. And these are resolutions that actually passed the New York State Legislature.
Oh, that's really neat.
That's something good that actually passed in Albany this year for these honoring these young athletes and these teams. So that's nice to have that because it certainly there are some things in Albany that aren't so good that pass.
And next up, we'll be talking about it. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, our beautiful view of historic Market Street there as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got Assemblyman Phil Palmesano in the studio this morning. If I can get the button. There you go, Phil. There you are. A couple questions from viewers before we dive into Albany. First up, we heard from somebody that's lived in Caton, and they've been promised high-speed service, internet service for 10 years. It's never come. Why is there the latest setback? Where is all this money? We remember the bipartisan infrastructure bill and other things were promising all this money. Any updates?
It's a big problem, Frank. I mean, we've been talking about that. There has been a lot of money spent federal and state level, and it, for some reason, I don't know why, and we keep talking about it, we keep complaining about it, it's not getting to these rural areas, these rural communities.
Where it's supposed to be going.
Where it's supposed to be going. And listen, lack of internet and high-speed internet and access to the, broadband was a problem before COVID, and it was totally exacerbated during COVID that we saw with I talked to members, families, and students who couldn't have access. They couldn't have everyone on the computer at the same time because people were doing remote work. And they had to have the parents and were working. They had to have access to kids. I heard stories of some kids that families had to go park in the school parking lot
and in the library,
the library.
Yep.
And I mean that's just not convenient for families and for students. And with the money that's out there, we've heard of they always talk about the last mile, and it is a challenge in some areas for that infrastructure. But this is something that needs to be a priority with the money that's being spent, and there needs to be an accounting for this money to ensure that we're getting to these rural areas. I mean, that's the thing we always fight. All the money that is spent in New York State. When you spend so much money, there are some good programs, but ensuring it gets to our rural areas, whether it's broadband. We've talked about the mental health services. The amount of money, $1 billion for mental health. How are we ensuring that gets to our rural areas to help deal with mental health issues in our communities, like lack of transportation, lack of access, with the providers. So that's an ongoing battle. So I mean, I hear that individual and I hear those families, and we continue to get calls. We continue to push. It's very, very problematic. It needs to be a partnership and a collaboration with the private sector to make sure we're getting that infrastructure built. So we have that. So we have a long ways to go. So just because the governor or the president announces all this money does not matter until you certainly deliver and implement it.
So. Well, isn't that funny too? Because I'm sure you're aware of this, but with the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's supposed to spend all this money on exactly this. But yeah, when I was up your neck of the woods, I was driving to Albany a few weeks ago to see a concert, and so you've seen it on the side as they're doing construction, a big sign that says this road construction thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I mean, it's a nice metal sign that probably cost $20,000 to put up. And let's put it into broadband. Let's put it in anyway, that was a side note. Next question, sticker stores, what's the update?
Oh yeah, so we've talked about that time and time again, and we had I remember a press conference with our local law enforcement that came in. We did it in Schuyler County. I mean, these sticker stores are a scourge in our local communities, period. There's a loophole in the law, and basically the way, as people know, what they would do is they would sell stickers and sell T-shirts for like $20, $30, and what they do is then they hand out marijuana.
They gift you.
They gift it. Yeah. And it was a problem, and so they were circumventing the law. I mean, we knew when they made marijuana legal in New York State, it was going to be problematic for a host of issues. This is one of those areas and needs to stop. So in the budget, we passed legislation, which was positive. I remember we talked about it. That would allow our local law enforcement to shut down these operations on their own. They wouldn't have to get the permission of the Office of Cannabis Management, because before they would be the ones that would have to come in and shut down these stores. They'd have to have their staff come in, put the signs up, and they didn't have the staffing for it. Quite frankly, the Office of Cannabis Management was incompetent, was understaffed.
It was all about optics. That's all they cared about. Yep.
So when we passed in the budget, there are some actions the locals have to take. If you're a county or you're a city, you have to pass a resolution designating a local law enforcement or a local enforcement agency. So here in the city of Corning, I would think they would designate the Corning PD. If you're in Steuben County, I would think you'd be designating the sheriff's office. If you're in Hornell, probably the Hornell PD. That's what I would be doing. So, I mean, if I'm a county legislator, I'd be passing that resolution now in Steuben County and saying, I'll designating the sheriff to be the enforcement agency, so they have the authority to go and shut down these sticker stores without permission from Albany, and just getting these things shut down because they're a scourge, or they're not good to the quality of life of these community. Same thing in the city of Corning and Hornell. If I was on the city, I'd be passing this soon. Find out, work with your attorneys, find out the specifics. Make sure your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But there's no reason to wait around for this. We passed this in the budget, so
let's hit the ground running.
Shout out to the Steuben County Legislature. Shout out to the council members in Corning and Hornell. I would act on this sooner rather than later. Designate your local law enforcement as the agency that can go in and shut down these operations, because they're a scourge in our community. They don't belong here. They're operating illegally. They're taking advantage, and we see more and more of our kids getting caught up in this illegal drug use. And I mean, I know we have the process to become licensed. I wasn't a fan of it, but if that's the way it's going to be, you got to go through that process. And these illegal stores, because you don't know if they're being laced with something.
No. And have you seen we were talking with Sheriff Adler last week, the packaging that looks like candy?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. I mean, like kids are getting, Allard said that kids are getting into it, and they've had numerous issues of kids having to go to the emergency room.
Oh, yes. When we had the press conference, we had sheriffs from around the region. We had DAs and prosecutors. And they showed that. I mean, it's just, it looks like candy. I mean, these kids,
I've seen the wrappers on the ground here in Corning.
It's terrible. So we need to act. So at least the state empowered. I wish they didn't have to pass a local law. So always one more thing, but they should be. There's no reason why they shouldn't do it. So again, to my colleagues in the county and legislature and city council, act on this. Pass your local resolution. Let your local enforcement agencies shut these places down, because they should be shut down.
Absolutely. Now let's get back to Albany. We were talking about the things that passed that weren't good. You were talking about earlier things that passed that were good. Now let's talk about things that passed that weren't so good.
Well, the one thing that stood out at the end of session, and there were some things that didn't pass at the end of the session, which I will say too. I'll mention that first quick.
Yeah, of course.
We talked about the HEAT Act, which would basically a plan to dismantle the whole natural gas infrastructure system. Basically say that the PSC would not have to provide the obligation to serve. So if you want to hook up to natural gas, if there was something going on in the community, the PSC would have the authority to go in and basically just decommission natural gas in communities, which would impact local neighborhoods, which would basically mean they would have to fully electrify their homes. There was a lot of push on that from different groups, so that didn't happen. There's a push to pass the bottle bill to increase the deposit to 10 cents and expand that across the board to wine bottles and liquor bottles and things of that nature, which would have been very problematic. I mean, from an operational perspective, because they would have had to have been responsible for taking those back. So like bottles and corks on Market Street, I mean, which is not a big footprint. They would be, under this law, would be responsible for now people having to return liquor bottles and wine bottles that they sold back to their store. Where are they going to put them? And I brought that up during the discussion in the committee with the sponsor of the bill. It's like, where are they supposed to put these bills? Have you been in a liquor store? I mean, the footprint's not that big. There's going to be substantial capital construction costs that would need to be due, or contracting costs, and that's just going to add costs to our small businesses and to our consumers. And there was another bill, they call it the Extended Producer Responsibility, or the Packaging Recycling Act, that was opposed by a host of business communities. That's something that would have been passed tremendous cost on to consumers and businesses and things of that nature. So those three things kind of got paused. Some of those passed in the Senate. They didn't pass in the Assembly, and it's kind of, thank God. But these aren't going to go away, so it was just nice.
Well, we've been talking about the HEAT Act for a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
And it's really the HEAT Act. It's one of the tools in the arsenal, and as I said over and over, it's with the part of the Green New Deal for New York, and it's really part of a plan. The HEAT Act and these plans is to totally dismantle the affordable and reliable natural gas infrastructure supply and delivery system. It's totally designed to take away consumer choice in how you heat your home, cook your food, power your buildings, and the vehicles you drive. It's definitely going to jeopardize reliability of the grid, because the grid can't handle the full electrification process, because it's a march towards full electrification. And it's going to lead to more and more businesses, families, farmers, and manufacturers leaving the state of New York.
Of course.
Continue our nation-leading out-migration. When it comes to our energy policy, affordability and reliability and costs are never part of the equation. It's only if it's so-called clean and green, and we've talked about it's not clean and green when they're using child labor, when they're poisoning water, rivers, and streams in our African countries. And the fact of the matter is, New York only contributes 0.4% of total global emissions. China contributes 30%, has 1,000 coal plants and building more, and continuing that. And I know we're talking about the debate tonight, and I don't agree with Joe Biden on anything, but I do agree, and I brought this up on the floor time again. Joe Biden said if China's not with us on this, we're wasting our time. Believe me, we're wasting our time on this radical climate agenda that's not going to make an impact, but what it is going to do is it's going to add more and more costs. It's a runaway freight train heading on the tracks to the public that they're not aware about. It's going to increase rates, it's going to increase taxes. It's just one thing after another. It's something I'm very concerned about, because we're talking about one thing is like if we don't change our methodology on how we measure emissions in New York State, it's going to increase prices at the pump by 63 cents a gallon, increase natural gas home heating costs by 79%. The state, the PSC already approved future rate increases to the tune of $43 billion to meet the so-called clean green energy goals. And we talked about the consumer cost to convert your home over to full electrification from gas is like $35,000, so more for businesses. So those, and then we talked about the school bus mandate, which is something we can talk about.
I want to talk about that in a second, but
this climate. I'm sorry, I kind of
no, not keep going. But I just wanted to say it's to the point where this is, like you said specifically, it drives so many people from the state, the cost. Yes. Then maybe that's the goal. We'll be down to zero people, so zero emissions in New York.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's amazing to me. But and it's interesting. This bill we did pass. It passed the Senate. It did pass the Assembly the last day of session. We were in a Ways and Means Committee. Excuse me, I keep itching. We were in a pre-committee and going over the final Ways and Means agenda for the night. This was around 8 o'clock at night, and our ranker got a call and said, "Hey, they just added the Climate Superfund Act to the agenda." I'm
Are you serious? What? First of all, the name's terrifying.
Yes, and so that delayed everything. 2-3 hours before that bill came to the floor, because we had to brief it for a conference because it's so convoluted, so complicated, and such a disaster. What this bill would do for the viewer and the listener is it basically would empower the DEC, the regulatory agency, to review and assess so-called quote-unquote polluters, gas companies, oil companies, an assessment. $75 billion over 25 years, $3 billion a year. Now take it. Remember, these companies were playing by the rules. They were working within a legal framework. And they would go back and look from 2000 to 2018. So retroactively going back and assessing.
How is that even legal?
We can talk about that too.
Yeah, good. I got to take a break. Can we talk about it in a second?
Sure, absolutely.
One quick question just before we go.
Sure.
So you mentioned the ones that did not pass, the HEAT Act, the bottle bill, those. How much of that was, because I go on Empire Report, we talk about it on the program a lot, was the congestion pricing back and forth? Because that became the number one news story.
No question about congestion pricing when Governor Hochul announced to the world that we're going to pause congested pricing after it passed years ago.
Yeah.
That took a lot of the oxygen out of them, so they had to try to focus on that and try to find $1 billion, and that never did. So that
was interesting, because then didn't it become a tax, a different kind of tax?
Well, they were talking about whole different types of things, and we're going to have to go back probably and deal with that at some point.
Yeah, I don't think that's over.
There's a big hole.
Yep. All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program, because we're being joined by Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. So, Phil, I kind of cut you off there, and I apologize, but I had to take a break. Let's talk about, again, a terrifying name, Climate Superfund Bill.
Yes, I know we were talking a little bit about it. It's like basically it's an assessment. The DC would be able to go evaluate these companies, identify them, and assess fees, which they're talking about $75 billion over 25 years, $3 billion a year. Now remember, these are companies, and they would go back and look at from 2000 to 2018 over that period of time. Now remember, these are companies and operations that follow the laws, follow the regulations, had permits, and some of these permits were issued by the DEC. The same company that would now be going, the same agency that would now be going in and assessing penalties and fees to these companies. And the fact that matters, New York families, farmers, small businesses, manufacturers, our hospitals all benefited from using this. Gas for our cars and our transportation, natural gas to heat our homes, to power our buildings, our manufacturing. There's so many people that benefited from the technology that was in use, that was legal and permitted. Now we're going to go back and say we're going to retroactively penalize you because you're polluters.
Well, what's to say they couldn't do that to us, Phil?
Exactly.
I mean, what's to say you were using a gas stove 10 years from now?
Right.
You're under arrest.
And it will, because this is only in New York, because even the speaker, and I wish I had his quote here, I brought this up in committee, I brought this up on the floor during the debate. The speaker said, and I'm paraphrasing, I wish I had it, it was his own words saying, I've never seen a company not pass things along to ratepayers or customers instead of their shareholders. There's basically no doubt this is going to be passed on to the consumer, because that's what he said 2 weeks before that when he said we were not going to do this bill. But then a week later he's pulling it out, I think to appeal to environmental advocates because they wanted to have something. And then even another colleague said to think that this isn't going to go on to consumers, we're being quite naive. This would hurt our businesses, our economy, and would hurt the consumers, just as they said. It's all part of the Green New Deal. But there are even more than that. There's a host of legal and constitutional issues that are in place here. The governor needs to sign it. If she signs it, she shouldn't sign it. I mean, her lawyer's got to be telling this. I'm not a lawyer, but there are the Constitution is the retroactive ex post facto laws, which are often used to determine whether things don't work. The taking clause of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits excessive fines by the government. I think $75 billion is pretty excessive. Equal protection and due process clause of the 14th Amendment that protects against arbitrary and unfair punishment by the government. The interstate commerce clause, our trucking companies, our shipping companies, our businesses, and they think this is going to be assessed to all these companies worldwide. I don't know how that would happen. It would certainly put our state companies at a disadvantage to international. And also there was a U.S. Court of Appeals decision in the Second Circuit not too long ago that basically, I think it was in City of New York versus Chevron, the court rejected it, saying anything to do with global emissions needs to be addressed at the federal or international law, and they basically dismissed New York's case. So right there and then. So they can pass this bill, the governor can sign it into law, and from the people I've talked to, as soon as they do, there will be a lawsuit filed the very, very next day to take this out. And this is all part of this so-called green, clean, extreme energy agenda that's not going to make a difference in global emissions, because again, we're 0.4%. China's not going to help be a partner to this. They're not going to be dealt with these assessments and fees. So I don't understand it, and it's a runaway freight train heading down the tracks that the public's really not aware of.
Why would businesses stay here, Phil? Do you know what I mean? When you've got things like this, always, I joke with Sheriff Allard and others, when it's the end of session, they must get really nervous, because who knows what kind of, So it's got to be the same thing with businesses saying, how are they going to try to destroy us, especially these type of businesses? How are they going to try to destroy us this session?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right, Frank. I remember when we talk about, I always say when on the floor, I bring it up in interviews, when it comes to energy policy in the state of New York, businesses care about two things. Is it affordable? Is it reliable? Am I getting my energy supply at a reasonable rate? And do I have enough power to keep my lights on? Do I have enough power to power my manufacturing operations that have to run 24/7? That's what they care about. And if they're not getting affordable and reliable energy in New York, they're going to go someplace else where they can get it. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida. That's where they're going to, Texas, that's where they're going to go. And that's where they are going, because we see that continued out-migration of more and more businesses leaving our state. And I will go back to Doreen Harris and Basil Sagos, the co-chairs of the Climate Action Council, who designed this radical energy plan of where we need to go. Last year, after the budget, and I brought this up during the budget hearing this year, they were out after the budget was presented saying that we need to change the methodology. I brought this up earlier. Change the methodology and how we measure emissions. Because in the bill we passed, the CLCP uses a 20-year methodology. Every other state in the country, international, the U.S. uses a 100-year methodology. And they said if it's not working financially or economically for businesses and families, this is not going to work. And by their own numbers, there's no doubt, they said that if we do not change this methodology to a 100-year methodology, it will, in fact, increase prices at the pump for New Yorkers, 63 cents a gallon.
Wow.
And increase home heating costs by 79%. So this is unacceptable, but that's the policy that they're implementing. And you see the cost, like I said, the 63 cents and 79%. We've seen the fact that the PSC has already approved $43 billion in future ratepayer costs to meet the clean energy mandates and green energy mandates that are being put on customers and businesses. And on top of that, again, just the march to full electrification.
Right.
For a homeowner who's using natural gas, and let's keep in mind, 60% of people use natural gas to heat their homes. 40% of our generation comes from natural gas. So it's actually up to 50% now, by the way. So let's, with the oil. So what are we doing? Who can afford this?
No one.
Who wants to electrify their home?
Who can afford to stay in New York State?
And get away from an affordable, reliable source of energy.
Yeah.
And they're going down the pathway from a reliability perspective, Frank, that the NISO, which is tasked with putting in, making sure the lights stay on, the power stays on, they monitor the grid.
Yeah. They
said by 2040 we need, and I'm getting into gigawatts, and one of my colleagues said never say gigawatts because people don't know. A 1 gigawatt of generation is the equivalent of powering 750,000 homes.
Yeah.
Our total generating capacity in New York is 41 gigawatts. Okay, so by 2040, to meet these mandates, we need 27 to 45 gigawatts of dispatchable emission-free generation.
Yeah.
Dispatchable means 24/7 power generation. Wind and solar does not count. That's not 24/7. It's intermittent. It's not reliable. Sure. So what are they going to use? They don't know. The technology doesn't exist yet. They don't know. Are we going to use carbon capture and sequestration? Are we going to use advanced nuclear? Are we going to use hydrogen? Are we going to use renewable natural gas and propane? We don't know. So, and my whole argument is if we're going to meet and try to transition this energy industry, you don't tear down a bridge before you build a new one, do you?
No,
of course not. You build the new one and then you tear down the bridge. But unfortunately, they're moving at breakneck speed on so many different issues, and they're tearing down our reliable and affordable energy infrastructure like natural gas. They want to dismantle it. DC is not issuing renewal of air permits, not permitting new permits. Until we have that other system in place that's reliable and safe, we should not be dismantling anything, and that's what's happening. But we're seeing that happen, especially with our school districts. Talk about breakneck speed. That's where our school districts are really getting hammered by this, with the mandate for the electric school buses, which we can talk about too if you want.
Yes, I want to talk about that in a second. I'm not trying to be rude. We're getting so many comments in that I'm trying to type them all into one place. How's this? Why are we as a state so worried about the pollution that we can't see and think nothing of the trash that's all along our roadways? That's a good point. It makes our area look trashy. I don't understand why they can't think for the future when it comes to maintaining population here in New York. Good statement.
I'll give you an example. Remember and I brought this up in committee when I was debating the bottle bill and EPR with the chairwoman of the committee. The bills that didn't make it to floor, thank goodness. I said, she said, well, look at the plastic bag. We got rid of the plastic bags. And I go, on that point, we always look at the immediate. We never look at the ramifications of what this policy will implement. I remember hearing I said, what do we use before plastic bags? We use paper bags, right?
Right.
And it's really energy intensive to make those. But here's the thing. I remember it was Wegmans that said that the cost of one tractor trailer of, they would need one tractor trailer of, one tractor trailer for a tractor trailer of plastic bags.
Yeah.
The equivalent they need for paper bags was 8 tractor trailers.
Wow.
So that's diesel trucks running on the roads, emitting pollutions up into the air.
Right.
So where is the common sense there? And she goes, well, I don't see paper bags. I go, I do. I see them everywhere now. Yeah. And people are going to be, she goes, well, people use the renewable bags. I go, recycling bags. I go, not everyone does. No. I mean, some people are going to go in the store, on fixed income. They might not have a bag with them, or they're not. And they said they'd rather pay 5 cents for a bag than pay $2.99 at the register for a recycled bag.
Exactly.
Sometimes. So it's kind of out of touch. So that all these policies, and the other thing on the environmental side that they don't talk about, that I bring up, let's talk about the electric cars.
Yeah.
The batteries, the elements, the cobalt, the lithium used to produce these electric batteries to power the electric vehicles. Cobalt. Cobalt. 70% of the cobalt is extracted in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well documented. They use child labor. Proven. Some 35 to 40,000 children, some as young as 6 years old. They've died, they've been maimed, they've been paralyzed through mining collapses. The lithium, when they extract lithium, which is radioactive, they're doing them in African countries, and it's put into rivers and streams, and we've had problems with them. It's almost like if that was happening, if kids were dying here and being paralyzed here in New York and the U.S., if we were poisoning water, rivers, streams here, it would be unacceptable. But because it's happening there in these poor countries and they're being exploited to help us meet our so-called clean green energy goals, it's okay. It's unacceptable. And I brought them on the floor. You guys don't like oil rigs. You don't like fracking wells. I don't see any children working on those.
No.
And it's just the hypocrisy
it really
of the Democrats in New York, this governor, and the progressives in Albany that are pushing this radical agenda, they don't care who is impacting other places, or they might say, don't say we don't care. Well, your policies that you're supporting don't do it. So I have spoken about this time and time again. They get mad when I bring up the Democratic Republic of Congo. Most people don't know, but I speak up because it's hypocrisy.
It's wrong.
It's wrong. I mean, we're exploiting and hurting kids in other countries. We're exploiting and hurting poorer countries, and on top of it, we're just putting money in China's pocket. China, this is a whole violation of our whole energy security policy. China controls 80% of the solar market.
Yeah.
China also controls more than 80% of the rare earth materials, the cadmium, the lithium, the nickel, the zinc, all of it. It's all processed in China. Now, the cobalt might be extracted in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but it's all being processed in China. How do they process it? They use coal energy.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? We're enriching China. We're exposing our national security on energy policy. It just doesn't make sense. It's bad policy. It's bad politics. It's just not common sense, and something I'm going to continue to speak out. Senator Merrick, Chris Friend, we all do. Yep. It's just the policies, and it's just like a runaway freight train handing down the tracks to the public. Most people don't know from an affordability and reliability perspective, and the quickest one that's coming down the pipe is the mandate on our school districts with the electric vehicles.
And we'll talk about that when we come back. How about that? We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We are being joined in the studio during the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program by Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Phil, just a couple quick comments, and then we'll get into some other issues before we wrap up. A question for Mr. Palmesano: why is it that when the government comes up with an initiative that they feel will benefit specific portions of society, they turn around and say this won't cost you anything? Does the government really think the average citizen believes that statement? It may not come from our back pocket, but somewhere along the line, we will be responsible for the cost.
Well, I will say to the person who made the comment, the state, those in the power who are passing these laws, the governor, the progressive majorities, Democrats, they might know it impacts the consumer, but they pass it anyway because they think the benefits of passing it outweigh the cost. That's this whole climate agenda, is they see the benefits outweigh the cost, and it's not true because we talk about it because we're talking about global benefits and not being benefited in New York and the costs and what's going to be put on. So it makes no sense. I mean, I'll give you one example, like with the HEAT Act, we talk about it. They said, well, it's going to limit the consumer cost to 6% of your income, your utility is 6% of your income. There's no way that works for everybody. Even if they put that cap, so regardless of your usage, where's their incentive to conserve? So if you're making a moderate income or whatever, you can keep your windows open. It doesn't blast your air conditioning. You're not conserving. But yet, all that's going to happen is that cost is going to be shifted to other ratepayers. So everyone else is going to be paying higher rates. Businesses, small business, manufacturers, farmers, families, senior citizens, everyone's going to be paying more to make up for this. So it's not feasible. It's just it's guys. And like I said, even when we were talking about the Climate Superfund, the speaker said himself that this will be passed on to the ratepayer. Another member of the legislature said, yes, we're naive to think that this isn't going to be passed on to the consumer. But yet they go full speed ahead with it. They go full speed ahead with the school bus mandate. It's one thing after another. Well,
let me read these comments first.
Sure.
Oh my, Phil needs to be in charge. I never realized the amount of fuel difference hauling the paper bags. I think that is a really interesting point.
I was shocked by that.
Yeah, and the next question, just making sure something didn't happen there. Okay, now you're getting on thin ice. My favorite guest. I thank you, Phil, for sharing your wisdom. My favorite guest. So you, Sempolinski, Allard, you guys are on thin ice. I need to think about my job here. You guys are taking over. All right, I knew you wouldn't want me to read those, but those are very nice statements. Thank you for everybody viewing. So let's talk about the two bills that you had. We've got about 10 minutes here that you had killed. And the first one you mentioned is the EV, because I know on this program I have been not shocked, but this is a really hot topic throughout, even when you're not on the program. People are outraged.
And they should be. And this thing is moving so fast, so quickly. A year ago, as part of the budget, we passed the electric school bus mandate. And what that says is basically beginning in 2027, every school bus purchase that a school district would make would have to be zero emission, which is basically like an electric school bus. And not only that, their entire fleet would have to be converted by 2035. So let's talk about some of the problems with that. First of all, this is the mother of all unfunded mandates.
Yes.
The price of a normal, near zero emission, by the way, diesel school bus is about 125, maybe 150,000 with bells and whistles. The price of an electric school bus, $400,000 to $450,000. The Empire Center did a study saying the additional cost in replacement for electric versus diesel would be cost school districts an additional $8 to $15 billion. Now that doesn't take into cost for improving and developing charging infrastructure.
Right.
That's the New York State School Pupil Transportation Study did a study. That's billions of dollars more yearly. And the other one is getting the power from the grid to the school. We had a press conference earlier in the year where we had the Horsehead School Superintendent, Mr. Douglas. We had one from Shenandoah. The Shenandoah School District said it would cost us $30 million to build a substation to bring the power in. That would be borne totally by the property taxpayer. Horsehead School District said $5 to $10 million, totally borne by the property taxpayer. Wow. Now here's where the hypocrisy comes into place from the state of New York. So school districts would have to have their entire fleet converted by 2035 with no out for feasibility. If the grid can't handle it, if it's too expensive, there's no out whatsoever. You have to just keep buying these school buses. But the state of New York, for their medium and heavy duty fleet conversion, it doesn't have to take place until 2040, a full 5 years after our schools. So we're making our school districts and our property taxpayers be the guinea pig for this unproven experiment. We know about range issues. If you got the heat on, if you got the air conditioning on, if you're going up and down hills, if you're going in rural areas, driving around, it drains the battery quicker. So
you might as well say goodbye to recognizing all the state champions. Exactly. How are they going to make it to a state championship?
How are they going to make it? They're going to need more buses. Then they're going to have to spend more money on more buses. How are they going to do that? So this was all done without a cost-benefit analysis on what it would cost our schools. This was all done without a feasibility study, working with the NISO, working with the Public Service Commission, working with your utility. Say, how can we work this out? Is this feasible? Or safety issues about fire prevention. So our bill would basically, that we put forward, would delay it, saying school districts would not have to begin purchasing a school bus. I said to 2045, because that's the year that the public, by the law, would have to begin purchasing medium and heavy duty fleet. 2045 or until the state converts their entire fleet, whatever happens first.
Right.
So the state of New York would have to convert their fleet before them. So we would require a cost-benefit analysis. Let the schools, let the state of New York do a cost-benefit for analysis first. Go see what it is. Do the feasibility study, see if it can be done. If it can't be done, they can pump the brakes on this thing. Literally pump the brakes. And the safety study, because of fires.
Yeah.
I mean, these things catch on fire. They burn fast and quick and hot.
Yeah.
And our kids they burn so quick. Our kids would not have the opportunity to get off school. So it's going to be a tragedy. It's going to take a tragedy. We see the fires, and you see them on the EV scooters and e-bikes. The fires happening in the apartment complex, people dying. That's what's going to happen. That's what it's going to take to pump the brakes on this
What
thing.
if the voters vote down? Because that would still have to be a part of the... Because think of Corning Painted Post, they obviously got their second budget through, but even in Horseheads, they had the public forums that got heated. People are getting sick of higher budgets. Well, they ain't seen nothing yet.
Right. And there are people who are voting on electric school bus purchases. I mean, I think most people, hey, you need a school bus, we're going to support the... And I remember going and looking at one of the votes where it said, for multiple school bus purchase, like $800,000, multiple.
Yeah.
You're talking about maybe two buses here on electric side of it. So I think they're going to start getting voted down, and then what's going to happen is they're going to mandate that you can't vote on school bus purchase. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
you're
right.
They're going to shove it down our throats.
I thought
it's just
found
one
it
thing
out
after another. And let's make this. The other part of this bill would say let's make the sources of these be from the U.S. So we're not using child labor from the Congo to build it. How ironic! Our kids are going to be riding on school buses that are made by kids in the Congo,
the same age,
mining, and putting in to make these batteries that are riding underneath them that are dangerous.
That's
so
sick.
it's so hypocritical. So we need to pump the brakes on it. And Governor Hochul was asked this question recently. She goes, "It's up to the legislature to act." That's a cop out.
Yeah,
let's
sure
act. Here's a piece of legislation that would pump the brakes. Doesn't stop it completely.
No.
Just says let's make some common sense adjustment. Do a cost benefit, feasibility, safety, and make sure the state does theirs first. Let the state show they can do it before we put this mandate on our property taxpayers and our school districts. So they killed that bill, which makes no sense because they could and they wanted to.
Yeah.
They don't want accountability on anything,
and we're gonna have to keep people hanging on the second bill that got killed because I'm out of time.
Oh, that's the problem.
Yeah, sorry about that, Phil.
That's okay.
We are completely out of time, but that's a good way. We'll have you on back again soon. How about that? We'll do it soon. And with all these, your fan club out here, they demand it. They demand to have Phil on once a week. Hey, thanks for joining us this morning. And Phil, thank you, of course, for joining us for the Student Senior Services Fund section of our program. Enjoy tonight's debate, and we'll be talking about it all morning long tomorrow, starting at 6 a.m. with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning.